Oh, good morning, everybody. You are very welcome to Music Network's Professional Development Series for December 2022, Taking Charge of Your Performance Career, Developing Essential Skills. My name is Sarah Ledwidge, and we are delighted to welcome Tasmin Little to deliver our opening session, Resilience and a Career in Music. Just before I introduce Tasmin, I want to mention that the session today is being recorded and will be made available to view on our YouTube channel in the new year. The recording is set to active speaker view, so viewers of the recording will only see the active speaker at any time. We hope this will encourage as many people as possible to put their cameras on as far as is possible for you, because as you know, it's much nicer for the speakers to speak to people's faces rather than to blank screens. So we'd really appreciate that. Please do keep muted though, unless you're asking a question. If you'd like to ask a question at any point, please raise a hand and Tasmin will pause at suitable moments. If you prefer, you may type questions into the chat box, but Tasmin would prefer a dialogue if at all possible. I'm just going to give a very brief introduction to Tasmin. For more than 3 decades, Tasmin Little enjoyed a multi-award-winning and varied career as an international solo concert violinist, touring the globe as soloist with the most acclaimed international orchestras in the top venues of the world. She made 45 commercial recordings, gave many world premiere performances, and received numerous accolades, including a Classic Brit Award, Gramophone Award for Audience Innovation, and BBC Music Magazine Personality of the Year Award and Chamber Music Award. In 2012, Tasmin was awarded an OBE for services to music. During the pandemic, Tasmin gave numerous interviews on BBC Radio 4 and was vocal in highlighting the issues faced by freelance musicians. She has a consistent track record of advocating music education and has twice been invited to speak in the House of Commons regarding the importance of education and the arts in the UK. In 2019, she became co-president of the Yehudi Menuhin School, and she is vice president of the Elgar Society. So over to you, Tasmin.
Thank you very much indeed, and good morning everybody. Lovely to see the faces. Thank you for putting your cameras on. It's nice to see who I'm speaking to. When I was asked to do this talk about resilience, of course it got my brain thinking about how we all deal with everyday life challenges, actually. In fact, because let's take my life this morning. My printer decided it did not want to print my notes for me. So what did I do? I had to find a different way to remind myself of all the things that I'd thought about, and I made a beautiful Word document. It was very pretty indeed, and I couldn't print it. So I thought, okay, right, what am I going to do? Because I'm using my computer, I can't read it off my computer. So I emailed myself. I then downloaded the document, and I made a selection of screenshots on my phone. So I'm going to be referring to that from time to time instead of a lovely thing of notes. The other thing that happened this morning was that my upstairs boiler decided it didn't want to work. So it is Arctic at the moment, and I've been in between trying to work out how to get this document off my computer and onto something that I can read. I've been trying to find a plumber as well. So I think the thing that I'm really wanting to say right now is that every day, each of us deals with challenges, and sometimes they are worse. Oh, you see, here's the other thing. So what I have to do now is disregard that, put my phone on too, which I should have done anyway. Sorry about that. Right, now back to our registered program. So each of us every day, we respond to our challenges, and quite often we don't even consider them as challenges. We're so used to dealing with these things that they just become part and parcel of our life. I mean, I don't think any of us can think of a single day that we've ever had, or very few, maybe on holiday, where we didn't have to make some sort of a decision that involved an evaluating process, possibly with consideration, or a great deal of consideration, with regard to other people. If you're a parent, that becomes ever more problematic. Each of us is a son or a daughter, and we have got to work out things sometimes for our parents as they get older. So human nature is designed to solve problems and to be incredibly creative within that process. Sometimes when I felt a little bit overwhelmed by things, I remember seeing a card. In fact, I sent it to my daughter when she was having a bit of a tough time at university. And I said, when you're struggling, the card says, when you're struggling, remember that an aeroplane takes off against the wind and not with it. And, you know, salmon, they swim against the tide. So I think there is something within the psyche of living beings that is capable, entirely capable of solving problems. So then, of course, it becomes a little bit about a mindset. And that mindset has got to be one where we understand this capability. And if I were to boil it down to one thing, it would be that we have to have quite a bit more faith in ourselves sometimes than we actually do. We have to trust that for years and years we've been solving problems. Now, of course, when it begins to become more difficult is when the unexpected occurs. So you might have planned for something and then it goes down the toilet. And we all know what we're thinking about, you know, over the last few years. And I'll focus in a bit more on that in due course. But those are the moments where we have to dig a lot deeper and really work out the measure of who we are and how we're going to deal with that, and coping strategies as well. So again, a little bit later, I will be talking about that. Now, I can see from this chat box that there are a lot of performing musicians in our session today. And one of the things about being a performer is that every time we walk on stage, we take a huge risk. Performance is full of risk. And that level of risk can be greater or lesser, depending on how many people are on stage with you, how visible your role may be, or how you perceive yourself. But it's also about a little bit more than that. It is about how we are feeling at that specific moment. So I yesterday was interviewing day before yesterday was interviewing two wonderful young musicians who were on the New Generation Artists program of the BBC. And it was a great dialogue with both of them. And we were talking about lots of things to do with challenges. And one of them is a jazz guitarist. And I can't think of anything more stressful than going on stage not having a clue what I was going to play. That would really freak me out. And yet, this is something that his name is Rob Luft, it's something that he does all the time. What is the difference between Rob and me? The difference is very simple. I believe I can't do it, and he believes he can do it. He can do it, of course, because he's trained to do it, and he's been doing it for years and years. And that's the other thing. We're back to what we're familiar with. We're back to the risks that we take day in and day out. Every time we walk on stage, it's not that we don't think about it. It's just we are experienced enough. We know that we've done it many times in the past, and we can very likely do it again. So what I wanted to say was that probably every single person that is in this session is a risk taker. And that is a very, very good thing indeed. So risk takers are used to the unknown. They're also used to believing, by and large, that whatever gets thrown their way, they're going to be able to cope with. So I've had a lot of unexpected things happen during the course of my travels, and I'm going to take a little bit of time to explain to you how I solved some of these problems in the hope that it might give some of you some ideas. What I do want to say is that this is a dialogue. I mean, obviously I'm going to have my stream of consciousness here, but I would be very happy for anybody just to wave at me and ask for some more clarity on something, or just continue one particular idea that I've touched on if you don't feel that I have explained it clearly enough, or you just want to know more about it. So please take a risk and do wave at me and catch my attention somehow or other. That would be great. And I'm quite happy for you to unmute yourself and go, hi, Tasmin, can I ask a question? I don't consider that rude in the slightest. So resilience. Yes, so I'm just also referring to things that I was thinking about when I was trying to work out the best way to talk to you about what has helped me in the past. So I've said we need many qualities as musicians. We need our good health, and that's something that we're in partial control of. We need to be organized, but we also, in addition to this resilience, it is about an ability to think on your feet, to be able to sometimes quite quickly solve a problem. So let's say that, and this has happened to me in the past, I've been on stage live in a performance doing a concerto, and unfortunately the conductor has had a bit of a mind something or other going on, and he's brought the orchestra in the wrong place. So that is an example where I have to instantly react, or he doesn't bring them in at all. So I've got to make something up on the spot until he decides he's going to bring them in. So this is an example of an immediate response within me, the performer. Also quite a bit of adrenaline, because you're going, oh no, this is a disaster, particularly if it's a live broadcast. That's a fun one. But I've got to instantly go, right, do I carry on and hope that he's going to get them in the right place? Probably unlikely, unless he's going to shout out a bar number to them. So that one would be instantly discounted. It's up to me to solve the problem. It's up to me to look at him, work out what's going on, possibly catch the leader's eye, and then either jump to a new place or make something up until we both have found each other again. And there was one particular instance where I was playing a piece, very complicated piece of Szymanowski called Notturno e Tarantella with one of my wonderful pianists. I'm going to spare his feelings and not tell you who it was, but we had rehearsed it, and it was in the days when everybody used sheet music. Actually, I've always used sheet music, apart from when I was playing the challenging Ligeti Piano Concerto. But anyway, so the page turner in this very fast tarantella, unfortunately turned 2 pages. And because my pianist didn't know it quite well enough, I mean, did know it, but was basically playing what was in front of him, I could see from just looking over the corner of my shoulder, I could see exactly what had happened. And I carried on playing and thought, any moment now, he's going to realize there's a problem and turn back, and he didn't. So we were out for about a page or so, because the first thing was, am I going to jump? Or is he going to change? No, he's not changing. And all of this, of course, this is stretched in time, because when we're on stage, we are working, our brains are working super fast. So it's like, you know, when people say, if you think you're about to die, you see your entire life in front of you. It's not quite as dramatic as that, but everything, you are in split second mode. You are so highly tuned that you've even got time for these thought processes to happen, even just in a couple of very, very quick notes. So anyway, I realized, no, he's not going to, he's got no idea what's happened. So I've got to be the one to jump. And luckily I knew not only my own part, but his part very well. So I could time it. So I knew that when he got to this one bar, I could jump and we would be back again. It was quite amusing because then he said to me at the end, "Oh, it's not like you to have a memory slip, Tasmin." And I went, "I didn't have a memory slip." Page turner turned 2 pages. It's really quite funny. But what does that story also tell? That story also tells the value of preparation. Because had I also not known what he was playing, we would have not managed to get ourselves back together again. So part of resilience and risk taking is that you can do that because you've done a lot of preparation. You really know your stuff. And the more stuff you know, the more risks you can take. So one of the things is about preparation, so that if something changes, and this is just, not even just within performance, but if something changes, you have got options there to manage this situation and come up with a viable best way to solve that particular problem. My father was an actor, and so I grew up with the idea of uncertainty right from the word go. So I was very used to my father being out of work. I was very used to being told that we would have to just be very careful about everything that we were spending money on, because we didn't know when the next job was going to come in. And it was quite a useful upbringing for somebody such as myself that was also going to go into a highly risky career. And looking back on it, as an adult, I can see my father's coping strategies when he was out of work. So when he was out of work, he was very disciplined about certain things. He made sure that he invested in his career in the sense that he got busy. He didn't just sit at home wondering when the phone was going to ring. He did a lot of different things, such as writing. So a part of what he was doing as an actor was he was writing as well. And he used a lot of humor to cope with the uncertainty. He also helped a lot of people, which, whilst it didn't bring in the bacon, as it were, it gave him a sense of purpose, because that's something that I think is very important to each of us as human beings. We do need to feel valued. We do need to feel like we're making a difference, not necessarily every single day, but definitely in life. If you've got a reason to live, then there's every reason to pick yourself up, dust yourself down and get going again. Whereas I think what happened to a lot of us in the pandemic was that there was a sense of hopelessness and even uselessness. If we couldn't play for people and do our jobs, then first of all, sometimes who were we? Why were we existing? How were we going to earn any money? So many things had a detrimental effect on our psyche, because we lost a big part of our sense of purpose. So as musicians, we want to connect with people, and we weren't able to. And I've asked you to switch on your cameras because I want to look at you rather than a blank screen with people's names on, because these connections are important and they give us the sense of why we should be doing it, how we should be doing it, whether to continue, whether to be quiet, all of these things. And playing to an audience, you're picking up that vibration the whole time. And that's why I think a lot of us struggled to do these virtual concerts. And going back to Rob, this marvelous guitarist who I was talking to a couple of days ago, he did, while I was doing a bit of research on him, he did one of his first concerts in lockdown was for a whole load of people, but he couldn't see who he was performing to. So his opening words, and he speaks very well, his opening words were, "Hello, everybody. Actually, I don't know how many people I'm playing to? Possibly just my mum, he said, which was highly amusing. But I think that he identified a lot, it just literally in that sentence, he reminded us that it is hard to know. And that's one reason why I liked always to have at least some lighting in a concert hall. I couldn't bear it when the technicians just made the audience area utterly black, because then I felt I was playing in a void. Of course, I knew I wasn't, because the applause had sounded as I walked on stage, but it was utterly disconcerting. Couldn't bear it. So I always asked for at least some minimal light so that I could, not play into a void, not play into a fog. So that's that. Right. So let me, I'm just going to pause in case anybody at the moment has got anything that they want. No. Okay. I will carry on. So some things that I have coped with, a very, very early one was in 1991 when I took my first trip to Belfast to play with the Ulster Orchestra. And it was very much, during the Troubles. I was right at the start of my career. I was getting well known. I'd done my first prom. I was excited to go and play with the Ulster Orchestra. And it was a Saturday morning, and a little bit like today, I woke up, I was still living at home, not earning very much, not paying any tax because I wasn't earning enough. And London was covered in snow. And in those days, you had to try and call either the airline or the airport. Can you imagine trying to call an airport now? It would be unthinkable. But anyway, we couldn't get any sense. British Airways said all flights were operating normally. London Airport said the airport was shut. So the only thing to do was to brave the snow and get there to the airport and find out whether I was going to be able to get on a plane. This story can get very long, so I will condense it into, I did get on an aeroplane at 11:30. It did not take off until 3:30. It was a live Radio 3 broadcast. I'd been up since 7 o'clock. On the aeroplane, there was the delightful British Airways mid-morning snack that consisted of a dried out bit of croissant with some plastic that vaguely resembled some cheese. So I hadn't eaten all day because that thing was quite unpalatable. I'd sat on an aeroplane for 5 hours before it took off. I had a mobile phone with me, even in 1991, which was a godsend, because I was able to call my agent and I was able to say to him, right, well, we might be taking off. If you don't hear from me in the next whatever, then I've taken off. And eventually we did. And I got to the old international airport, which is an hour out of town, at about 4:30. The rehearsal was due to finish at 6. We were live on air at 7:30. And got in a taxi. And as we got closer to the centre, the traffic got worse and worse and worse. And then my taxi driver said, there are 3 bomb scares near the Ulster Hall. And then we didn't move for half an hour. And then eventually I got a telephone call from the lovely orchestral manager at the Ulster Orchestra saying, where are you? And I said, well, I'm not very far away, but we haven't moved for half an hour and I don't know where I've got to go. And he said, okay, he said, do you see such and such a building? And I said, yes, I'm staring at it. He said, get out of the taxi and go and stand by that building and I'll be with you very shortly. So I thanked the taxi driver and paid him an insanely small amount. I asked him, how can you earn a living? And he said, we deal with this the whole time. And I thought, yeah, you are resilient as well. So anyway, then got to the venue. I think it was 6 o'clock. We just got time to, the orchestra were in overtime, just got time to quickly run through the concerto. And the orchestra said, do you want anything to eat? And I said, no, I can't bear eating before I play. So, and then this magical thing happened. I have an internal thermostat. And when I've done as much as I can, that thermostat clicks in. And I think, okay, I can't do anything more. I've sat on an aeroplane all day. I've walked to the venue. I've done my rehearsal. I can play this piece. Yes, it's a live broadcast, but what the heck? How bad can it be? I know this piece. I love it. I'm just going to go out there and enjoy it. And you know what? I had the most amazing concert, and the audience were incredible. They had no idea what my day had been like, and nor should they, because that's not their problem. That's my problem as a professional. I've got to pull it out of the bag, and my thermostat and my ability to have faith in myself and what I can do helped me to do that. And of course, my preparation, not on the day because I didn't really have any practice time, but all the preparation that I'd done up until that point enabled me to think, I can do this. It's going to be fine. What can go wrong that hasn't already gone wrong today? It's time for it to go a bit better. And indeed, it did. And there were so many times when travel plans didn't go as they should. And, you know, the worst one was trying to get to Belgium all day and play an entirely solo program of including Bartók's solo sonata, impossible piece to memorize. And it happened twice to me. In the end, I thought perhaps I shouldn't program this piece because something always seems to go wrong with my travel plans when I program this piece. But one time was going to Denmark and not getting there until just before I was to play. And another time was Belgium, literally arriving at the venue at 10 to 8, getting into my dress at 5 to 8 and on stage for a 2-hour performance at 8 o'clock. So once again, this whole thing of having a trust in yourself because you've done what you've been doing for so long, and a trust that even if I had a memory slip, I'd find my way again, or even if I just was feeling tired, adrenaline would kick in to supply the necessary energy to get through a monumental program. So this whole thing is to do with preparation. It's to do with our mental attitude and our belief in ourselves. How do we muster up that belief? Because, of course, we don't want to be arrogant. We don't want to go, wow, how great am I? Yay, go me. On the other hand, there has to be a healthy acknowledgement of everything that we've achieved. And to get to the stage where we are a performing musician and earning a living and doing it, something's got to have gone right. Because when you think about our journey up until the moment where we actually do start earning a living, most of us would have started as a young child. I started when I was 6, nearly 7. That's a pretty average age for many of us to start. And, you know, we get taken to our music lessons. We continue really working hard, even when there's GCSEs going on and A-levels and all of that sort of stuff. We then find enough money to go to college and work like mad. And we then take our first faltering but brave steps into the profession. Already before we've done anything, we've done more than many people who, you know, walk into a job. And so I think we have to remember as musicians that we are so disciplined as people that we have to acknowledge that we are talented, we're disciplined. Even when we haven't felt like practicing, we've done it because otherwise we weren't going to be any good. We have any number of wonderful attributes. We're very imaginative. We're highly creative people. So I think it's worth occasionally writing down either the steps that you've taken in order to get where you've got, the highs, the things that you've created for yourself, like, you know, got this amazing gig, went to play for somebody or other, or in such and such a hall, or with an amazing set of musicians. I think we tend to take a lot of that for granted. And, you know, when I was looking at my CV, I just sort of took it for granted. And a lot of people go, oh, you did what? And I go, yeah, actually, gosh, I did play at Carnegie Hall. Simon Rattle did ask me to be his very first soloist when he was just starting at the Berlin Philharmonic. Why me? He could have asked anybody, and he wanted me. So I think we do have a tendency, many of us, to not notice these milestones that many people would just go, I don't know how you do that. How do we memorize stuff? I lose track of the amount of times that people say to me, I don't know how you memorize the Elgar violin concerto. They, you know, people want to know how we create that magic. And it is magic that we create in front of people. And I think we mustn't lose sight of that as well. I'm just going to pause again, see if anybody's got any thoughts on self-belief or how we have this faith in ourselves. Yes. Hi.
Tamsin, well done. Lovely to listen to you. Thank you so much. I think self-belief is an absolutely huge part of being a musician. I think it can stop us in so many ways, and a lot of the time we don't realize it. I'm a musician all my life as well, and have come through lots of challenges, and definitely I think I find that the hardest. Just looking back and saying, look, you've done that before, come on now. And you know, if you don't get, I'm a singer songwriter, I'm not in the classical field, it'd be more kind of folk, I suppose. But absolutely, if you're not getting a certain gig or your record doesn't get played, but then you forget about all the times that you have been played, you forget about. So I think it's a very good thing for us to be reminded not to take our achievements for granted. So I absolutely agree with you. I think it really applies to people who've been on the road a long time, like probably many of us here, and trying to stay on the road. And if you're a mother with kids, if you've brought up a family, and you know, it's even harder. Like,
Yes.
no disrespect to any of our male musicians, but you're trying to really juggle stuff, you know. So absolutely agree with everything you've said so far.
Thank you so much for that feedback. That's really lovely. So I can see also Ken Whelan has said, I think imposter syndrome can be a very crippling voice in our head. It takes a lot to overcome it. That's so true. And so I just want to jot down a couple of things to myself. Voice in the head. It is so true, because there can be times when we're in the zone and we're feeling like we're on it and it's going well, and then we're on that positive thing. But I have had times when I've been on stage and for whatever reason, either I'm a little tired or I don't know, something upsetting happened, and it's just, I'm not quite as positive as I always am. And it doesn't take a lot to push that down. And I think very few people want to be honest enough to admit that, because as musicians, we never want to admit that we're not well. We never want to admit that we doubt ourselves. Very few people would admit to imposter syndrome. And apparently Judi Dench doesn't have that much self-belief. This amazing actor who's done everything, who I would imagine most of us admire and revere and think, wow, I'll never forget her in that. She's just been somebody inspiring. And yet even somebody like that worries that she's going to be found out. I think that was it. That was what I read in one interview. She's always worried that one day somebody's going to find her out. In other words, that she doesn't quite deserve to be up there because everybody else is better. So I think it's helpful for us to realize that we're just not alone in that. But why do we sometimes feel that way? I think it stems from our determination and desire to be the best we can. What was it inside us that made us want to keep on practicing? It wasn't because we thought we were good enough. It's because we thought we weren't yet good enough. And it's because we wanted to be better. And we always wanted to get better. I always wanted to get better. And a lot of people said to me, why are you stopping? Well, I mean, to be fair, there were many reasons why I chose that moment to stop, but the act of stopping, I had already decided in my 20s that I would do it. For a very simple reason. It is painful to watch somebody who's been at the top of their game go downhill. And I had sat next to Yehudi Menuhin playing Mendelssohn Octet. I had been at the school for 10 years. I'd watched him struggle on stage with his bow. He had a big problem managing bow control that set in remarkably early. He was so brave to go on stage hampered by this difficulty at the frog. And it was only when he was in the upper half of the bow that he felt comfortable. But some bow strokes demand that we do them at the frog. And, you know, playing Mendelssohn Octet with all those semiquavers in the scherzo was a nightmare. His left hand was still there, but, you know, he did it and he got through, but you never really, it was quite hair-raising being on stage with him, and quite difficult for some people who admired his playing to watch him go downhill. Yes, everybody said, of course, musically he got better and better, but technically he just wasn't as good as he had been. And there comes that moment where, like an athlete, you have to acknowledge that you're getting older, and things that you just, it was no problem at all when you were 20s and 30s, you know, 40s, even fine. And then in your 50s, you sort of think, gosh, that was hard work. And worse, because I really hated the idea of being stagnant, I always wanted to get better, which meant that I was running faster and faster and faster in order to make sure that I got better. And I realized there would come a moment where I just couldn't run any faster. And that would be the moment when I would start to just go on a level like that, which I didn't want to happen, or worse still, eventually. And I would have had a few more years inside me, I know that. But of course, our diaries get planned a long way in advance. And it's no good to think to yourself, I didn't do that so well today. Oh dear, I didn't do that so well today again. And then you suddenly realize, oh, okay, this is now becoming a bit of a problem. And then you've still got 18 months, 2 years work to get through. So I made a decision that I wasn't going to let that happen. I didn't want that to happen. I didn't want my family or my friends or my audiences to have the the pain of watching me struggle on stage. That just was not going to be something I wanted to do. Wasn't the only reason. I am very interested in lots of different things, and this sort of leads me on to my next thing, which is, you know, sort of who we are as people. I'm just going to make a note to myself, because I just wanted to say one final thing on imposter syndrome and being in the right mindset to allow yourself to get out of your own way and just do what you want to do. So two things. I remember I was in Canada studying with an amazing Hungarian called Laurent Feneves. And I was studying Bartók second violin concerto. And there's a really tricky passage on the very first page. And I'd practiced it. I could play it. It was fine. I could play it. Guess what? I went to my lesson in front of Mr. Feneves. I completely mucked it up. And I said to Mr. Feneves, it's so annoying. I can play this. He said, yes, I know you can. He said, I want you to play the first page again with one leg in the air. I said, Mr. Feneves, this is hard enough with both feet on the ground. Thank you so much. He said, nevertheless, I want you to do that. So I did it. Of course, I played it perfectly. Why? Because I was so busy concentrating on my balance that I got out of my head and I just played what I'd practiced and I could perfectly do. And that taught me a lot, which is this whole business of we're getting the crippling, as Ken Whelan said, the crippling voice in our head. It takes a lot to overcome it. Oh boy, yes, it does. My teacher used to have me play tricky pieces while reciting the alphabet backwards. going to remember that. That's a great one because I do teach now. That's a marvelous one. Thank you very much for that, Ken. That is really excellent. And that's it. Basically, we can do it. We've practiced it and practiced it. It's the fear that can send it either way. It can give us the adrenaline to do it really, really well, or it can just overtake our mind, and then we worry, and then we tense up, we go into a shell, and then it gets worse, and then we think, oh dear, it's getting worse, and then it gets worse still, and then by that time you've kind of given up. And I find it quite interesting. I'm not a great watching sports person, but I do like watching tennis, and you can see the inner struggle when somebody isn't playing their best. And I remember Pete Sampras. There was this one thing, I think it was his final Wimbledon, and he was such a god, of course, he was amazing. But I remember he was doing so badly. And he was, I think if he'd lost that set, that was it, he'd lost Wimbledon. And they had their short break. He changed his shirt, he ate a banana, he stared at the ground, and then he came out on court again. He was another man entirely. He smashed ace after ace. He returned ball after ball. He stormed through that set. He stormed through the next set. Whatever he'd said to himself during that moment, and of course, Sue Barker probably asked him, but I'm not sure that he said anything that was terribly enlightening. But whatever he said to himself, his fighting spirit, his determination, his ability to drown out the voice that was getting in the way and replace it with a different voice. I've never forgotten that. And it is about la, 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 la. I'm not listening to you, the negative voice. I'm going to only focus on the fact that I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. And that is, one way. And before I walked on stage, every time I would smile at myself in the mirror and I would go, I can do this. And it's, just looking at myself back to me, the mirror of me encouraging myself to do it was a really helpful thing. I mean, it might sound a bit silly. It might sound a bit sort of, arrogant, but it was just the good voice inside me drowning out the bad voice and the little anxiety voice that goes, ooh, maybe you're not going to be so good tonight, Tasmin. Replacing it with a, yeah, you can do this. Go ahead. Have fun. Make it count. I read that tennis players stare at the strings on their racket in order to center themselves for their performance. Very interesting. I'm loving these comments. Exactly. It's whatever it is that you focus in on. And quite often I would focus on my hand, my bow arm hand, rather than the left hand. It's too busy, too active, the left hand. It's sort of a bit kind of, but actually this is like a solid area that you can focus in on. So yes, I think it can be in performance, it can be about finding that one constant, that thing that you're going to concentrate on. Right. So what I wanted also to talk about is risks that we take in our lives. So very, very specifically, I've gone ahead and smashed up my life on 3 occasions. Yeah, 3 occasions. So the first was when I was in my mid or later 20s. Yeah, later 20s. And I wasn't very happy with my agent at the time. It had been fine, but he was lazy. And I was thinking, no, there's stuff that I ought to be getting and it's not happening. But as I'm sure many of you will understand, as a soloist or as a freelancer, to not have somebody on the end of a phone to get you a gig or to hustle for a gig, that's very scary. And so that was a big, big, big step. Changed to a different management, changed while I had something good. So if there's a voice that's inside you, you like that person, but there's a little sneaking suspicion it's no longer working. Don't ignore that voice until it's really no longer working. Keep checking in. see if there's other ways of managing it. But if that's the end of that particular chapter, you have to be bold. You've got to take that move, obviously, whilst preparing a new move. But for me, I had good things in the diary. I had something to bring to the table, and I went to chat to a new management, a bigger management, actually. And I said, well, I'm doing the last night of the proms, and I've got these recordings, and it's all going very well. And they went, yeah, okay, we will take you. And so that was when my first grey hairs arrived, because it was a very, very scary process. But anyway, I did it, took a deep breath, so much better. Everything was going great for 10 years. And then guess what? That little voice was in my head again. It might be the end of this particular association. Maybe we've just got stale with each other. Maybe, maybe I need somebody new talking. I'm so sorry I have to run so hard to tear myself away. Oh, thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Tasmin and Sarah. Look forward to listening to the rest on the recording. Yes, and a happy Christmas to you as well, Sharon, if you're still there. So this came at a particular point in my life where I was feeling that there were aspects of myself that I wasn't able to develop, which was very specifically work in the community that I was very interested in. And I began this project, The Naked Violin. I began it while I didn't have an agent, because by that time, unfortunately, things had gone a bit pear-shaped, and I'd sort of, not intentionally, but had burnt my boats. So I had 6 months where I didn't have any management at all, which was probably the most scary professional time of my life. And so I still had work, because I still had work for the next, 18 months, 2 years, but I didn't have anybody who was getting me work for beyond that. And so anyway, I started this project, and it went amazingly well. And because I was focusing not on help, what am I going to do, but let me remember the things that are important to me. Let me remember the things I'm good at. I'm good at communicating. I'm good with people. I'm good with interaction. This interests me, and I want to make more of it. So that was the birth of this idea, The Naked Violin. And Radiohead had just released their newest album online, but with an honesty box. And I thought to myself, no, hang on a minute. People are often saying that classical music is inaccessible, or it's expensive, or they can't get to a concert. Let me remove those barriers. Let me make a recording and put it up online entirely for free. And I thought I was helping other people, but bizarrely, in thinking of other people and thinking of this problem of the perception of classical music, I ended up doing myself the most enormous favor. And that wasn't even on my agenda. It was just the good karma that came my way in trying to not focus on my problems, but trying to see other people's, not problems, but things that needed to change within the perception of my profession. And so in tackling an issue that meant a great deal to me, I ended up rejuvenating my career in a massive way. I literally reinvented myself, and rapidly found, again, a different form of management. So I decided I didn't want to go to an agency. What I wanted was to find people that I liked working with. I found myself the most amazing PA, who Sarah will know I work with still now. I found myself the most wonderful Irish agent, Sinead, brilliant woman, amazing dynamo, absolutely incredible. She loved my idea for the Naked Violin project. She was just so switched on about it. I found myself a USA agent as well. I had the guy doing my website. So I didn't have an agent as such. I just had a great team of people that were brilliant to work with, who we just had brilliant brainstorming sessions. And people went, "You don't have an agent?" I went, "No, I don't have an agent." So I flipped the problem on its head. And that's another thing that I want to say about resilience and problem solving. It doesn't do to always attack a problem from the front. Turn it upside down, approach it from a different angle, see it with different eyes. Like, you know, sometimes you can have these puzzles and you're trying to push something together that won't go together, but if you twist it, something can go slot through. So instead of bashing something that won't go together, twist it, turn that problem, rotate it, view it from a different angle, and you'll see a potential solution. Shelby, hello, thank you for these stories. It makes me thank you. Is there a coping mechanism you suggest when someone's rude and negative towards musicians and artists, especially now, where society had shut down the arts during the pandemic and showing that the arts are not valued? Yes, that was a horrible thing. What if the negative voice comes from people and is directed towards someone who's extremely talented and has received accolades and is just starting out? I hope this makes sense. Well, obviously, this is going to depend on whether you are directly experiencing negativity from somebody, or whether somebody's just written something horrible about you. I think the negative thing, first of all, never retaliate, ever. Because that is just, first of all, stooping to somebody's level. But you can, I think there's a couple of ways of doing this. Very often when people are negative, it stems from fear. Nobody who's insanely happy is horrible to people. It's people who are unhappy with themselves, with their situation in life. They might be ill, they might be unhappy in a relationship, they might be unhappy with what's going on professionally. It will never, this negative voice will never come from somebody who's innately comfortable with what's going on in their life. So I think the first thing is actually to recognize it's nothing to do with you. It's not this is not actually your issue. It's their issue. And what they're doing is thrusting it, misdirecting, but thrusting it elsewhere so that they don't have to deal with it, so that they are not the problem, you are the problem. So I think the first thing is to understand why that person is saying something. And if you are in a position to directly communicate with that person, then to do it very calmly and actually ask them why they might feel that way. I did a very interesting coaching and mentoring course that was all about asking insightful questions, prompting the people with issues, either identified or even not identified, and very often not identified, asking people very insightful questions like, why do you feel that way? What is it about the such and such that makes you believe that such and such? So not a do you, not a yes, no question, but actually inviting them to elucidate what is going on, why they've come up with that solution. I can't remember where it was, but I saw, I know, it was at a peace symposium, and I saw a very interesting thing. This person of color who'd gone to America to a sort of Ku Klux Klan chap who was full of hatred. And she sat down with him. He had allowed her half an hour. They spoke for 2 hours, and by the end, and all she'd done was ask questions. And he'd eventually just began to realize what was going on. And now, not only is he not a member of that, he actively campaigns against that. So by just not battling against him, not even going, you're wrong, I'm right, but why? What is it? Where does that come from? I think that that is one of the most powerful things that we can do anywhere, actually, not just no tune with someone rising to life, all boats, lifting ourselves. We're lifting ourselves, and we're actually inspiring other people. When you lift yourself and you don't buy in to that mentality, but you just try to promote a dialogue, that's one of the most powerful things we can do, is listen, ask, and then really, really listen to what's going on in that person's life, because sometimes it can be quite helpful to understand where people are coming from. And it can also prompt us to ask ourselves some question. If we are personally struggling with something, why? Where does that come from? Does it come from childhood? Does it come from a teacher who was not very kind? Does it come from a difficult relationship with a family member who might have drip fed negative stuff? it's always come from somewhere. We haven't created it ourselves. We've only responded or reacted to something that's come our way. And very often these things go back a long, long, long way to either something deeply hurtful that happened, something very emotional, watching somebody have a problem with something and taking it on board ourselves. So I think, you know, asking questions, promoting dialogue is always going to be a way forward. Now, just looking, because I see that we're unbelievably, we are getting towards the hour. It's not the end of the session, but it's just the end of this. Learning to see when something's no longer working. Yes. So that was really learning to see when something's no longer working, continuing to ask yourself the question, you know, what is working in my life? If something isn't working, you can't really bury your head in the sand. It's tempting to, because it's difficult to change. It's really scary. But on the other hand, it's not a good thing, because it will just you'll either end up getting very resentful, the situation will get worse, and then it might be too late to change it. So you need to change it when that voice begins to make itself regularly felt. Yes. Okay, so then I just wanted to talk about mental practice in a moment. So I'm just going to make myself a little note to come back to that, but I'm going to invite you once again. Someone else's success does not depend on my failure. Yes, that is yes, guilt can be part of it. We worry that if we've been given an opportunity, someone has been deprived of it. Well, listen, there are a lot of opportunities, and that's another voice that we need to remember, is that in fact we can't be everywhere all at the same time. We need lots of people. And as a soloist, I couldn't get competitive about the fact that someone else might have been chosen above me, because nor could I even get competitive about somebody who was playing really, really well, a piece that I love and also feel I played very well, because there will be people who really don't like my playing. In fact, there were plenty of people who didn't like my playing. I couldn't take it personally, because people are looking for different things. They're looking for a certain way of being communicated with, and I couldn't supply it for everybody. I am a very specific kind of person. I'm a warm and communicative person. And sometimes people would hate the way I played Bach because it was way too emotional, and they prefer their Bach to be, more reserved, more Baroque and stuff like that. That's not who I am. And nor am I going to change my playing to give a second-rate performance just because some people like it that way. That, I had to have my own identity and believe in what I was playing on stage. Otherwise, that doesn't work. So again, another thing is to trust that there are plenty of people who will value who we are. And there were plenty of people. I felt very valued and very appreciated. So that was never an issue. So so don't add guilt to it. There's plenty of opportunities. I know that particularly in pandemic times there weren't. We had to be much more creative about that. But we can also think about ways of creating opportunities, not just for ourselves, but by being generous to other people within the profession. Whenever I had a festival, I invited as many people as I possibly could. I gave work to people who I admired. Whenever I was giving an interview, I would talk positively about other soloists. I mean, not people that I really don't like very much of, but there again, then you just choose not to speak about that person. I liked to highlight people that I really have admiration for, and I've got plenty of people that I do admire. So yes, being positive about your colleagues is very, very important. The people who you really do respect and connect, because it's very easy to backbite or to, moan and groan about people. It's much more difficult to keep on. And again, in remembering to appreciate ourselves, remember to appreciate your colleagues as well, and acknowledge the role that they're playing in making everybody feel good. So I'm just going to allow you, if you wish, to unmute yourself or put something else in the chat box if you want to. Okay, I'll give you, oh, hello.
Hi, Tasmin. I just wanted to ask if you talk a little bit about rejection.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Rejection is really hard for each and every one of us. And it finds its roots in our childhood. I'm not talking about parents, although that can also be the case, obviously, people who've had a difficult childhood with regard to their family. But rejection can start very early with preschool, not being in the right friendship group. It can be a rejection of somebody that you want to be friends with that just goes, I don't like you. It can be you've put your all into something. I was never very good at painting, but I put as much as I could into one particular piece of artwork. I had the most horrible art teacher, and I was about 8 or 9 at the time. And she just looked at that and she said, well, that's rubbish. She took my painting and she ripped it up. And I mean, it's shocking to think of that now. I don't think you'd find that these days. You might still a bit, but not so much. But that is like a punch. And when somebody tells us that they don't think that we're any good, or just we failed an audition, or they think our playing is awful, or, you know, something like, or bad reviews. Okay, I used to get bad reviews, not too many, but I got them. And they were very hard to read, very, very. And when I made my debut with the New York Philharmonic Orchestra playing the Tchaikovsky, I had 4 performances. And the main reviewer for the New York Times hated my conductor, Naomi Yervi, because Naomi Yervi had done a concert in support of one of the orchestras that had been on strike, and the reviewer's wife was on the board or something like that. I don't know, there was something. Anyway, it was an absolutely personal thing that this reviewer, first of all, did a hatchet job, a total decimation of Naomi Yervi as a person. His review began, who is Naomi Yervi? I wouldn't have liked to have read that myself. But then the next thing was the review of our concert. Tasmin Little, I mean, I'm paraphrasing now, but it was something along this line. Tasmin Little, an English violinist, played the Tchaikovsky rather slowly. And that was it. I didn't play it rather slowly. The slow movement was slow and the fast bits were fast. But he didn't want to say anything nice about the entire concert. And I was caught in the crossfire. So again, as far as negativity is concerned, sometimes, not always, but sometimes, it is not about us. It is about the person that is pushing negative things in our direction. So once again, we have to acknowledge, you have to first of all ask yourself, was it valid? Okay, so I gave a not very good concert in Auckland. It was my debut, unfortunately, with the lovely Auckland Philharmonic Orchestra. I was playing the Sibelius. I'd lost a valuable travel day because my flight had to be redirected. So I was jet lagged. There were various things going on for me personally that were difficult. I was, the concert, the hall was lovely. I did like my conductor, but we hadn't had very long to put together the performance. Long and short of it was I stood up on stage and didn't feel very good about it. And it was the worst performance I ever gave of the Sibelius. And first of all, I had to pick myself up and do it again the next night. And secondly, I had to not listen to the review that went. I'd been so looking forward to Tasmin Little coming. I've admired her on record for a very long time. Well, this was a bit disappointing. She seemed insecure of herself and this, that, and the other. Unfortunately, every word of his review was accurate. And so I not only had to read the review and think, yep, he's on it. I then had to go, how do I get back on this horse? Feeling rubbish about myself, having everybody read this bit in the paper, having somebody see exactly how uncomfortable I was on stage. How do I do that? And it was one of the most challenging things to cope with. And that's where one's resilience has got to be amazing. So I had to remind myself of all the things that I was coping with. And even though I was jet lagged, stuff was going on for me, I'd still stood up on stage and there was still validity in a lot of my performance, but just not as much as normally there was. But that just because that day I'd not managed to rise to the top of my potential with this performance, it didn't dictate the future, that I could play this piece. I was on it. I'd played it many times. I'd recorded it. My fingers were working. I just needed to rest. I just needed to breathe, trust that I had everything inside me, mentally stand on one leg while playing the Sibelius so that I would worry about my balance and not about my head, about my fear that I would land once again publicly flat on my face. And so there was a lot of talking to myself, looking in the mirror, encouraging myself, acknowledging that despite these challenges, I could still do it. I was strong enough. I'm a very strong person. I can absolutely get back on stage and nail it. And I did. But it was really one of the most challenging times of my entire life. So to have that sort of public humiliation. And I'd wanted so much to give my best. And in fact, I ended up writing to the reviewer about a year later when I was in a very different place. And I wrote to him and I said, I've been wanting to write to you for a long time because you wrote this review. And I read it and it hurt because everything you said was very true. And I wanted so much to impress everybody. I wanted to give my best for my public, for the people that had waited many years for me to come and play in Auckland. I wanted to do it for me and I didn't. And I had to acknowledge that on that occasion, I couldn't give as much as I usually do. And you have to allow yourself to be human. Anyway, he wrote back the most adorable email. It was the loveliest email. He went, I wondered what was going on because it didn't sound like you. And he thanked me for being honest. And it was just such a nice exchange. And it leads me to this other thing that I alluded to at the start. We put such pressure on ourselves always. We don't want to be ill. We're never ill, because then if we're ill and people know we're ill, we might not be invited again. And so we're always fine. Everything's great. It's all going fantastically well. We're not challenged at all. This is a breeze. So we're not able to be honest sometimes, which means that unfortunately we can't always receive the support that we need in order to perhaps help ourselves to get back up again. We can get back up on our feet, but it's an awful lot easier and nicer if we can support each other. So potentially finding like-minded people who won't think the worst of you, who will understand who you are, how you've got where you've got, how to support you if you're going through a bit of a rough time. So I would say definitely if the negative stuff, if you're just feeling really rejected inside, to write down all the things you're really good at and really make a list of everything. Even if it's just, I get up every morning and I help my children with this, I help my parents with that, I write encouraging letters to so-and-so, I practice my instrument, I make a slap-up meal, I'm kind to people, I listen to people. Even if it's just that, it really is about acknowledging the total of who we are. We are not just our instrument or our voice or our compositions. So remind me what you do.
I play piano and gamelan, and I am a composer.
Right, yes. I remembered reading that you'd written that at the top, but I wasn't sure. I can't see your name when I'm seeing your face. So that's already 3 amazing things that you do, by the way. I mean, most people are just a pianist. I was just a violinist. You do piano, gamelan, and you compose. That's 3 huge and different talents. So I want to, first of all, acknowledge and admire you for doing 3 things brilliantly, and encourage you to remember that there's a breadth of your talent that perhaps you've forgotten about, and perhaps you're allowing some fear or negative or just not really kindness to yourself. So I hope that you will, first of all, understand that all of us do fear rejection. We really do. It just, there's nobody that likes that feeling. But there's also nobody on the planet that is a feeling and sensitive person, and musicians are all sensitive. We have to be, otherwise we couldn't be a good musician. So there's nobody that has not experienced rejection, and plenty of rejection. So I've had plenty of rejection romantically, and I've had plenty of rejection from people who've just gone, no, we don't think we want to give you a concert, thanks, Tasmin, because we just don't like your playing. Does that mean I'm a bad player? No, it doesn't at all. I was a great player, but I wasn't I wasn't the player I wasn't one size fits all, and nobody's one size fits all. And I think we have to remember that what we're doing in creating things, we are creating something very unique, and that's a brilliant thing. But in exactly the same way as, I hate rice pudding and suet pudding. Please don't ever feed me, and baked beans. I don't ever want to go to somebody's house and be given that. I won't eat it. But I mean, my mother loves baked beans. How am I going to discuss baked beans with her and come to an agreement? We're just not. She likes them and I don't. And it's the same with, with music. It's about taste. So when somebody's rejecting you, it's not, you can't take it personally, but I would urge you not to, because whilst it might feel like that arrow has come straight at you, the arrows, can be deflected as well. You can just visualize that you've got a lovely cloak of protection, that you can see that this thing's coming your way, but it doesn't have to pierce you to the absolute core. You can just acknowledge that on this occasion, what you were doing didn't work. And that's happened to every single one of us. Every single musician has had occasions. I've just given you a couple of occasions where what I was doing just didn't work. And it's hard, but we've got to remember the whole context of who we are and what we can achieve. It's not, our careers have longevity. And so just on one particular day might not be going so very well, but, there's every chance that the following day it'll be the best ever, because there've been times when we've done it and it's been, wow, that was my best ever. And that might have been preceded by a day that was, oh dear. And actually, in fact, another time when I had to get to that moment of crisis, and it really was a crisis, was when I was playing at the last night of the proms. I was playing Saint-Saëns Introduction and Ronna Capriccioso, and the rehearsal had gone terribly. And I mean, this was going to be live broadcast to 100 million people worldwide. And I was scared stupid that I was going to fall flat on my face in front of so many people. Well, I saw it the other day. Somebody sent it to me. It's on YouTube, that performance. And I remembered feeling terrified before walking on stage. I was so scared because the rehearsal had been dreadful. And then I remembered, they do say, bad rehearsal, great performance. And I suddenly thought to myself, yeah, bad rehearsal, great performance, because it can be the other way around. Great rehearsal, bad performance, which was my Auckland experience. But bad rehearsal, great performance turned out to be true for me. The chansons went brilliantly. I loved it. I had a blast on stage. Andrew Davis was flirting with me. It was great. So anyway, thank you very much for raising that absolutely crucial element of rejection, which, you know, can be to do with our profession as well as in our personal life. Ken is saying, I had my worst. Oh, Ken says, you may just not be the right person for that particular moment. Exactly. I had my worst ever day auditioning for a music degree place. It didn't happen. I was crushed. Fast forward a few years and I ended up back in the same place doing a music master's. Ken, you're full of great stuff today. Thank you. And Bianca, thank you. Thanks, Tasmin and everyone. Well, I never did very well in this one particular competition, the Royal Overseas League. They hated me. I never, ever got past the first round. And, you know, a few years later, I ended up giving many performances back at the Royal Overseas League, who had rejected me time and time and time again. So anybody got anything else that they might like to talk about, anything that that I've highlighted or haven't really spoken enough about? Sarah? Yes.
Thank you, Tasmin, for being so open and honest, and, you know, for putting such a positive spin on problem solving and facing down difficult situations. I think it's been a really valuable, insightful session for everyone. Does anyone have any burning questions, even outside of the resilience topic? Now is your chance. If you have anything you'd like to ask.
Yes, and if not, there's one other thing that I was going to talk about, but please, anybody, please do grab this moment if you would like to, and obviously no pressure if you don't want to.
As a composer, I always love to ask everyone, but especially top performers, you know, what are some things when receiving a score from a composer that that might be specific to you, or that, you know, might not be talked about that often? What are some important things?
Number one, make it legible and not too small. My heart always sank when the notes were so small that I had to have a magnifying glass. It's very friendly if they're big and fat, even if they're difficult. Just make the music really generous, and then you think, oh, I like the look of that. Yes, I can do that. But if it's like scrawling and stick-like, oh no, that's just awful. Just such a basic thing and so easy to get right. So just make it friendly to look at, really legible. And then obviously, if somebody's writing, like Roxana Penrifnick wrote 4 amazing world seasons for me. She played to my strengths, which are my sound and the fact that I like juicy harmonies. I really could get into those. So obviously knowing somebody's skills and their favorite bits. I remember Anna Sophie Mutter said that Andre Previn wrote this violin concerto for her. He wrote it very high because she loves playing right up at the top of the violin. So, you know, obviously if you're writing for somebody, it's nice to ask them if they've got anything on their wish list. But, you know, in the absence of that, just knowing a little bit about somebody that you're writing for and what it is about their playing that makes you like their playing. So if it's their sound, or if it's a particular way that they use their bow, or a sort of special silvery quality that they can bring to certain special moments, you know, knowing a few of those will help all of us to think, oh, that person's really got me. They know who I am and how I might like to be playing this. So just, you know, having that connection, I think is a really great thing. Anybody else? So the final thing that I had written down was about mental practice. I didn't actually speak about that. And so I'll just devote just a very short amount of time to letting you know that, that the last 18 months of my career was really challenging because I broke my finger. I broke this tendon here. I'd gone through my entire career, 32 years, no injuries, no nothing, never cancelled a performance, nothing. And then just literally getting dressed in a hurry, I trapped my finger in some clothing and I felt my tendon break. 8 weeks in a splint without taking it off. Anyway, I received amazing help from Chelsea and Westminster Hospital. They were fantastic, but I was very scared because I had to go straight into a tour of Asia and Australia. That was going to be my first thing back. And so anyway, I was talking about my fears to the amazing staff in the hospital. And one of them said, I hope you're doing mental practice. And I said, I don't know what you're talking about. What is mental practice? She said, oh, well, you should be doing it all the time. And I went, please tell me more. She said, you must close your eyes and you must literally in your mind, you are moving your hands. You can even physically do it, but you don't have to. She said, it's strong enough if you just really think how you're going to play something. She said, play every note. So the first thing I was doing was the bruch. So I literally went through half an hour of the violin concerto in my mind. Of course, I know every note. I know every note in the orchestra as well. I played the whole concerto. And can you believe it? My shoulders ached at the end of it. I hadn't moved. I was lying down on my bed. My shoulders were aching from the exertion when I hadn't moved. So mental practice is quite astonishing. And you see, our brains are plastic. They evolve, they change. We make connections all the time. So what you focus on will become bigger and bigger, which is why it's important to think positively, and which is why the negative voice is very annoying and dangerous, because it will recreate itself and get larger and larger. But so you can counteract that by pushing that away and making the positive voice far, far stronger, because it will drown out the negative voice. So our brains are extraordinary. They can do extraordinary things. And if you can believe that you can do something, then you really can do it. So we're back to the tennis players and their sense of self-belief, their purpose, the reason why they want to do it. Why are we doing this? Why do we want to play music? Why do we want to write music? Why do we want to listen to music? What is the purpose of all of this? So remembering the purpose, remembering the why, so that we can create the how, and we can create it here. And whatever we create here, we can make happen in the physical.
That's fantastic, Tasmin. Thank you so much for that. We talked a little bit about it on our CPD in November as well, but you know, everybody's take on it is so interesting and unique. So thanks for that amazing tip as well. Any other burning questions before we wrap up? We are at the time almost. No, I think we've all managed to ask our questions. So it remains for me to thank Tasmin again for her honesty and for sharing all of those inspiring thoughts with us. Thanks to all of you for your participation and your great questions. And do join us at the same time tomorrow. Eileen Gleeson, who's the CEO of the Cork Opera House, is going to talk with us about networking skills and presenting yourself as a musician. So
thank you so much, everybody. I thank you for all the lovely things in the chat. Thank you for just really listening, and thanks for having your cameras on and everything, because that has made all the difference. So that's been great to connect with you all, and take care and stay well, and yeah, look after yourselves.